Good evening,
Hello, Dino.
everyone. Get ready to meet David. He's the true force in the powerlifting community in Melbourne, Geelong. And I'm incredibly excited to welcome David Tran-Cong to this live Q&A session. David began his competitive journey as a junior in 2008. His competition personal best speak volumes about his dedication and strength. He's been competing multiply since 2017. His comp PBs are squat 320 kilos, bench press 227.5 kilos, and deadlift 285 with a PB comp total of 817.5 kilos. Beyond the platform, David is highly respected, equipped powerlifter, a knowledgeable strength coach, and he's also co-director of Lara Health and Fitness Center. I've even had the privilege of training with the BSFG elite powerlifting group, experiencing firsthand David's approach to conjugate method. I'm truly honored to have him share his insight with us today. Welcome, David.
Thanks, man. It's really good to be here.
What's happening?
What is happening? Yeah, it's winter here. It's cold, so definitely training hard to stay warm. Really. And, yeah, so winter time here in Melbourne, and it's getting colder and colder. Days are getting shorter, so battling through the dark mornings and earlier nights. But yeah, it's been good. It's been good. We've been trying to stay as busy as we can.
I see you're wearing Westside Barbell hoodie. Represent the strong fitness Geelong over here.
Brother. Just good. You look good.
Thanks, David. I'll just give it a couple of minutes. Hopefully, others can join, and then we can jump straight into the questions and then go from there. We've received a lot of pre-submitted questions, so let's try and answer as many as possible.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Really looking forward to talking about conjugate training. Obviously, something that I have a lot of experience with from my own training and utilizing that from clients in powerlifting and in sports as well.
Mhm.
I just want to, before we start talking about any training specifics, I want to give a shout out to, you got to always pay respects to the people that sort of have helped you along the way and taught you what you know today and sort of people that
Definitely.
have made me into the
Yep.
lifter that I am today. So first of all, look, we're in the Westside Barbell. So I'm a big fan of the guys over at Westside Barbell and what Louis Simmons has done for the sport of lifting. And so all to him to bring conjugate training to the forefront. A lot of people will follow his work, and you're never going to meet a coach out there who's so willing to help people and so open about his body of work as Louis and the late Louis Simmons, rest in power. And the idea of the world catching on to conjugate training and utilizing bands and chains and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, Louis has been the forefront of you know teaching everyone around the world how to use that. So that's amazing. Someone can have such a big impact on the sport thing. And you listen to the greats like Ed Cohen and the guys talking about stories of how they know Louis Simmons and them, and it's amazing to hear how open and giving he was to the sport. So yeah, my biggest respects to Louis Simmons and obviously what the Westside Barbell guys have been able to do for the sport of powerlifting. And then myself personally, having been taught the sport of powerlifting here in Australia, starting my journey, like you said, in the day, 2008, whatever it was, probably starting 2007, I was able to learn the sport of powerlifting through a crew in the gym called the Apollo Gym, originally from Footscray.
Mhm.
Went to university there. That's where I studied my degree in exercise science, uh, learning from guys like Matty Girvin, Storm Bostock. These guys are some of the strongest men in Australia. Daniel DePasqua. These guys have really been able to, teach me the sport of powerlifting, but also the ideas behind conjugate training and the principles of conjugate training and to adapt them and put them into practice. So yeah, much respect to Marty and the guys at Elite Sports Performance, the gym. They're now in Newport, so shout out to them if you guys are in the area looking for a powerlifting gym. You yourself have trained there,
Oh, yeah.
Dino. So
I've enjoyed
you can
training.
tell people, yeah, if they're stopping in from around the world or if they're here in Melbourne, it's definitely a place to go visit if they can get down there and train, especially with the powerlifting group.
David, I really appreciate that. But the beauty about what Louis had done for the sport is he had spent so much time studying, analyzing different methods and how he can actually, program for a specific lifter based on, having assisted lifts, overloading, speed work. I was just mind blown when I started reading about him. So yeah, big fan.
The amount of
And
knowledge that's there, it's amazing, isn't it? One man can be so
yep,
knowledgeable and so good at his job.
so true. Anyway, we've got a couple of friends join. Hey, James, got a few pre-submitted questions. Let's try and cover as many as possible. Uh, David, let's start with the basics. What is conjugate method to you? How would you define its core philosophy?
Conjugate training to me is, I guess, a set of principles and a way to put your program together, where, there's lots of different periodization models, and we know about linear periodization, we know about block periodization, lots of different training programs out there that you can follow. Obviously, every coach will have their own takes on it and their own tweaks as to what they think works, applying it to different individuals. I've just found that conjugate training in the essence of concurrent training and training all modalities of strength, hypertrophy, and power and speed elements all year round has been really good for me and the people that I've coached in a way that I can put them together in the most, I guess, beneficial way to the person that I'm coaching and the style of training. Well, let's face it, we all enjoy doing as well. Like in terms of the conjugate style, it can be a way of training fun. So why would you bust your ass in the gym and train so hard, like investing so many hours in the gym if you're not enjoying your training somewhat? You know what I mean? And
True.
I'm not knocking any other modality of training. Conjugate training is actually, if you listen to Louis' stuff, in terms of, like bringing in literature from the Russians, all his experience with powerlifting himself and all the injuries that he's, worked through and overcome. He put a training system together that incorporates all forms of periodization and just has put it into what we know as conjugate training or the West Side Barbell style. And, as he says, West Side Barbell often imitated. I say never duplicated. He says often irritated. But at the end of the day, I think the ideas behind the training system of being able to train all your variables of maximal strength, speed, power development, hypertrophy all year round, every week. I really enjoy that. And having, like fun training sessions where we max out, like doing the max effort sessions. If you do the background research into conjugate style training, it is breaking up the training into 4 days. Your max effort days being upper body, lower body max effort, where as powerlifters, we focus on our barbell squat, barbell deadlift, and then there's body being the bench press, and speed and power development days is referred to as the dynamic method, and using speed work in your weekly workout routines as well to develop explosive power. Yeah, so as a powerlifter, as you can imagine, we're not trying to move the weight slowly. It's, no one is purposely trying to move consistent weight slowly. We're trying to move the weights as fast as we can. That made a lot of sense to me. And obviously, speed work can be done in so many different ways. We can talk about, what Westside guys really brought to the forefront and what my movement was using chains and bands and accommodating
Mhm.
resistance to develop speed and power. Um, if you understand how to use those tools, it just takes your program to the next level, really. So yeah, very good for anyone from beginner all the way through to advanced. Anyone can jump in.
That's something that I enjoyed training with your team. Um, Not just it exposed me to the conjugate method, but for me, those max effort days were strength expression. I wasn't doing a straight bar, arm style squat or deadlift. It would be a variation of that. But the amount of energy and effort that goes into each one of those sessions had trained my CNS to an extent where I could realize bigger lifts in actual raw comp style lifts, but I wasn't getting burnt out. So yes, it is scary, but it's not like you're doing a maximal uh, load deadlift in full range of motion. You're probably pulling it from a block, or you're probably bench pressing it to a two board or a three board. you're still overloading your CNS system, and then you're getting used to handling heavier weights than you would usually do if you're, lifting raw.
That's a big part of conjugate training, and that ability to super maximal, overloading beyond, your 100% of what you can lift and what you can hold. There's lots of benefits to that. Obviously, central nervous system needs to be stimulated, and we need to train the central nervous system as strength athletes to become stronger and to be more efficient at producing force and to strain. I think that's the biggest thing there with max effort training is that no matter what movement you do, you have to learn to exhibit your core strength or your base strength and give it your all and just strain. The ability to do a good morning or a rack pull, is the same amount of effort, the same amount of strain
Mm,
as if you were going to 100% on a straight deadlift or on a free squat. Um, it's just that we're changing the parameters of how much weight we use and what type of movement it is. So whether it's a partial range movement or whether it's something that addresses your weaknesses or really exposes your weaknesses,
mm,
that's something that we can use to manipulate the training block. So what we're trying to focus on is using different exercises. And it can be different bars, rotating through different barbells, from a safety squat bar to a cambered bar, even on the bench press using a Swiss bar or axle bar, like a fat bar. The idea of rotating through different barbells changes the manipulation of how much intensity you have in your workout. How heavy can you actually go on movement? When you really get into advanced programming, you use the barbells to set the parameters of how much weight the person can lift on the day.
mhm,
And if you know yourself and you know your lifter, you're going to say, okay, well, if I want them to deload, I'll just make the movement really hard by making them use something like a cambered something, like that's not going to allow them to lift the same amount of weight as if they were to do a comp squat or, like a free deadlift or a normal competition bench press. You can also monitor fatigue and sort of work your way through your yearly training and adjust your training plan from week to week based off what type of exercise you select. Because there are exercises where you will go to 110, 120% of what you can normally lift because you're doing things like rack pulls, elevating the bar to a height where it's really beneficial and you have a lot of biomechanical advantage,
mm.
especially if you're rack pulling from heights above the knee or whatever. That can be in the realms of ego lifting as well, but who doesn't like lifting heavy weights? If you're powerlifting and you don't enjoy lifting heavy weights, is powerlifting the sport for you? You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, like some of these movements are just fun to do, man. Especially once we go through sort of reverse band exercises, adding bands and slingshots for raw lifters. But as an equipped lifter, adding stuff in like the squat suit and the bench shirt, and utilizing a suit for my deadlifts, it gives me that extra element of being able to lift heavier again than what I can do raw. And so, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's one good example in my personal experience is preparation for 2023 GPC week day. And I was fortunate to train with you. And then I think 3 weeks out from the comp, we were doing monster banded squats.
So at Circle
Yep.
Max, so if you refer to the band cycle where we have the bands coming from the bottom of the rack up against the bar, yeah, so that definitely doesn't help you lift more conventional straight weight.
Hmm.
We call it straight weight when you don't talk about the accommodating resistance. But like Circle Max is for us is like all out. If you say Circle Max to a training crew that does conjugate or follows Westside principles, everyone's just like, okay, here we go. You know what I mean? Like it's on.
It's serious.
If I talk about stories of what I've done with the elite sports performance guys and utilizing in our training in the day with them as well, we've used some gigantic bands, double 3 bands at a time. So you're getting a lot of overload. So if you can imagine, without even adding any power weight, like if you're unracking squat with some big monster bands pulling down, you can manipulate that top end weight to crazy amounts. You know what I mean? Like if we're adding some big monster bands in, I wouldn't be surprised if some bands being nearly 200 kilograms extra weight on the top, depending on how you set them up,
Hmm.
with how you around the pins or if you wrap them around the legs of your mono. And then from there as well, just yeah, just I've seen monoliths nearly flip over because of the band tension. I actually have seen one monolith flip over because there were so many bands and they probably hadn't weighted it down enough.
Mm.
Luckily, no one was hurt. No one was hurt that day. We just lifted the mono back up and we're all good.
Cool. So I'll jump into the second question. There's a common misconception that conjugate method is specific only to equipped lifters. Is conjugate method specific to equipped lifters, according to you?
No, anyone can do conjugate training. You don't have to be in powerlifting equipment to do conjugate training. I think it's the misconception that because Westside Barbell and Louis Simmons brought it to the forefront of everyone's attention of, like obviously when people looked up conjugate training or looked up Westside Barbell, they saw a lot of equipped lifting. And so therefore it's, this hardcore gym in Columbus, Ohio that was doing some crazy, crazy stuff. They're squatting with the big bands, they're using chains, they're using accommodating resistance. They're all squatting wide stance onto boxes. So people just get this idea of, it's almost like a little stereotype of like, oh, if you train conjugate, you train West Side, you train in equipment. But there are some really, really successful raw lifters out there that lift some great weights that do conjugate training as well. And I've seen conjugate training work for every single person from, beginners to advanced, like I said, and also raw and equipped lifters.
I think your team is a good example because you've got Mark who does raw, and then you've got the Lukes who are actually into equipped powerlifting,
Running equipped lifting,
including you.
yeah.
But when it comes to training, you train together.
Definitely. There's no reason why we can't. Obviously everyone takes what they can take in terms of the weight and the loads that they need to lift. And at the end of the day, the equipped guys might outlift the raw guys, but there's a lot of raw guys out there that are stronger than equipped lifters too. So, you just work with what you have as an individual on the day. You bring in your best, whether it's like say, for example, max effort session, right? Uh, if you're coming in, whether you have a squat suit on, briefs, if you're raw and you're just wearing your bike shorts or your tights, whatever, like you're gonna give your all. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's just you expressing your strength, your ability to strain and lift the weights that you can lift to, whether it be like 90% exercise, maybe more. And we're looking for PBs as much as we can. Obviously, if we can hit a PR on a certain lift that we haven't done for a while,
Hmm.
that's what maximal effort days are all about, beating PRs. So,
So true. I'm like that 2023 comp. I remember prior to that, my squat PB was 195 kilos, and on comp day, I managed to squat 210 kilos, and I had been training raw with your team. So for me personally, I've seen what it can do. Again, it just teaches you discipline and teamwork. There's a lot that you can take away from the conjugate
that,
method.
that is a great part of conjugate, but there's people out there doing conjugate on their own too. It is a little bit harder, it's harder to do certain things equipped on your own. It's nicer to have a crew around you that can help you with your equipment, if you are an equipped lifter. But if you're doing conjugate on your own, you're just taking the template of the training and you're applying that to the best of your ability of what you have available for equipment.
Mm.
And it's just about smart programming, whether it's your coach that's programming for you or if you're writing your own programs. You just have to sit down and just work with the framework of what conjugate is about in terms of max effort days, speed days, or dynamic effort days. Pick the exercises that you can do on your own safely. There's so many people out there now that have little monolift attachments in their squat
Mm.
racks. As long as you got the safeties in, like that's your dental plan. Um, Make sure if you're going all out max effort work, maybe have a spotter. My recommendation.
So you've actually touched upon it, about how a raw powerlifter can incorporate conjugate method. For a beginner, is there a basic plan that you would recommend? And how would they go about incorporating conjugate method if they've been doing linear periodization for a very long time and then they want to have some fun, get excited, and do something that's sustainable?
Yeah, something new. Yeah. Um, I think at the start, it really comes down to the person and how much exposure they've had to the lifts. If you're talking purely for powerlifting side, how much of those squats, deadlifts, and bench press have they done? If they're really, really new to the sport, the conjugate system still works, but you would be doing more of the basics. You would be practicing your barbell free squats. You would be practicing box squatting with a straight bar. You would be practicing, just competition style bench press more frequently than an advanced lifter because an advanced lifter knows how to do those movements proficiently and if they're an elite lifter,
Mm.
it's second nature to them. So technique is not an issue. At the start, I think technique is number one. For anyone starting training, dial in your technique and your basics first. It's the ability to walk before you can run. So programming wise, use the conjugate template, have maximal effort days and have dynamic effort days, but you must get your technique and your fundamentals right. Conjugate doesn't work for people that haven't mastered the art of lifting safely and correctly. You know what I mean? Like you can't get away with that, especially as you progress as a lifter. It's going to come back and bite you in the butt if your fundamentals aren't there. You know, you can only build a pyramid as high as the base will allow you to. So having that really good grounding as like a starting novice lifter or a beginner, seek out a coach, seek out someone who can look at your technique. Don't try and, you don't have to do it on your own nowadays. There's so many coaches out there that are powerlifting specific that know what they're talking about. We've all done it. I started training, looking at YouTube videos too, and reading literature and trying to figure it out for myself. And it wasn't until I trained with the guys at ESP and got into a group situation that my technique took the biggest improvements, and I went along in leaps and bounds with how well I was lifting. Is because there was, if we were training in a group of 6 people, there's 5 different sets of pairs of eyes watching you while you train. And that's the beauty of training conjugate and team, is that it's not necessarily just the one coach watching you lift and them giving you the specific feedback. There's 5 people there, and some of them have trained longer than you. This is what I found training with the guys at ESP. I came in at a time where there'd been guys that are training for, 2 years before me, 5 years. There was guys with 10 years powerlifting under their belt. Everyone helped each other. Everyone helped the other person out that was lifting, like, because we were a team, and it was, like a team environment. Well, you take turns squatting. So say, for example, you can picture this, there's 8 people around a squat rack, around a monolift, and everyone takes their turn. You know what this is like. You've done it. Rising bar weight, just like a comp. This is what they say. Max effort days are like comp days, man. You come in and you're just prepared to just go all out and beat everybody else. That's the fun of it as well. But if you're the person lifting, you would expect that the other, 5, 6, 7 guys that are helping spot you and watch you, that they're having input on your ability to do the weight well and to lift properly. It's critique of your teammates to say, hey, your knees caved in. Let's keep them out. You fell forwards on that squat. Let's fix it on the next rep. Or while you're doing it, just constantly yelling cues at you. It's amazing what you will do when someone just yells at you.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, we've all been there. Picture a comp, a lifter's going for their third or their last lift of the day, and everyone's just yelling things at them. Like, it's amazing how that can really push you to the next level, is having that support around you. So, little things along the way with training partners having input and cueing you as well. I think that sort of stuff with the style of training that Westside made really popular is awesome. I can't vouch enough for having a good crew of people training around you.
And I think another frequent question that we get is, does conjugate method mean you max out every week? But it's not that case. You do manipulate the intensities through your block, and I don't know how many of them out there actually understand that. So I would actually want you to elaborate on that aspect.
Before I say too much, like, I have to point out that every coach or every person in charge of the programming, whether it's just you doing it for yourself or if you have someone taking care of your programming, everyone will do it a little bit differently, but it has to be done differently for the individual, because the style of training can be adapted so easily to the individual and how they recover, how they respond to certain lifts, what their weaknesses are. Like, if you just talk about exercise selection, you can literally design 10 different programs for 10 different people purely out of exercise selection. So from a team training point of view, we just pick the best exercises that will cover our bases. You know what I mean? And our rule here at Lara Health and Fitness Center, or the crew that I train with, the BSFG Elite crew now, is that if you have a comp coming up, all eyes are on you. The focus is on you. You know what I mean? So that cycle that you were talking about, Vic States, I can't remember what year that was. Was that
20,
like 5 years ago, man?
2023.
Okay. Wasn't that long ago. But so that cycle there, me and you, we were the center of attention because we were the ones getting ready for comp. So it's almost like everyone else, okay, let's work in with these guys. We want to support them. We want to lift them up so that they do what they need to do to get ready for comp. Exercise selection changes a little bit around that if everyone's still training together. accessory exercises can still be manipulated to the individual. You notice the way we train, it's always one big group to start, and then we break up into
Yep.
little groups.
Yep.
So the little groups, like depending on what our weaknesses are, you might go off and do something specific to your hamstrings and your glutes. Well, I might go off and do something specific to my quads, and I'll take a guy with me or a couple of people that can. So the team of 8 then becomes, 3 or 4 teams of, three or 2 people, and you train in smaller groups. And that's the way we just run our group cycles, and the way we run our, training sessions specifically. But to go back to your question originally with regards to, I guess, you can manipulate so many different things with maxing out.
Mm.
You have to look at your lifter and what they need. Me personally, I will be honest, I have had phases where I've gone in and out of strict. Every week is one repetition maximum. I'm
Mm.
not going to do that every single week. The programming suggests that you can't always go to your 100% based off how you're coming in on the session. Like a little side note, this is probably where I think Conjugate is a little bit, more uh, instinctive training than a lot of the other programming styles. Because if you have a mapped out, periodized program with linear progressions, progressive overload, what happens if lifestyle factors or something along the way causes you to derail your training? So how do you adjust to that?
Mm.
Conjugate training just means that, hey, if you come in and you've had a terrible night's sleep, or if you come in and you've been blowing with your missus, or if you come in and your lower back is just jacked up and you were supposed to take X amount of weight because it's a percentage-based program, how do you adapt that? What happens if you miss the lift?
Mm.
If you can't get to that expected number? In conjugate training, or if it's a max effort day, you just adjust. You pivot to go, okay, well, if I can't, let's say it was originally planned as a box squat heavy that day,
Mm.
right? If I can't do a 1 rep max box squat heavy, I'm going to take it to a triple or just do a double, because then you can manipulate how much weight you can actually lift, and you can work within your parameters. And that comes down to the individual. That comes down to the lifter. Yeah.
That highlights the aspect that your body does not understand kilograms. It is the amount of strain that your muscle tissues go through. So you don't have
Yeah.
to do a max squat. You could probably do a good morning, but there's always, a carryover strength to your main lift.
Regardless of whether you're doing a linear periodized program or if you're doing conjugate style where you have to max out on different movements, you're always working to your optimum capacity in a training session of like how hard are you trying to strain? What type of force output are you trying to produce? How much fatigue are you putting on the system?
Mm.
So that's all, across any type of programming, that's always factored. You have to always account for that. In conjugate training, we just utilize a really heavy day to learn how to strain better, to stimulate our central nervous system, to make sure that we are, learning to produce maximal force whenever we need it. However you need it, whenever you need it, you can produce some force maximally.
True.